We are going to discuss the history of electricity in Kenya since when it started. Electricity started in Kenya, that is Mombasa and Nairobi, where we had big Lister engines that would run the whole town. Now, if you stayed near those Lister engines, I know you can imagine the noise. Later, the company, since we had the British who were ruling all the three countries in East Africa, they started a company which was called East Africa Power and Lighting. East Africa Power and Lighting. And when they started East African Power and Lighting, they had several logos, but for the purpose of education, we will just concentrate on two logos. There is the first one, which they started, then later they modified it, and they modified it to look a bit better. After modifying it, we used to have East Africa Power and Lighting. Some of us used to mistake it with East African Power and Lightening, but it was East Africa Power and Lighting. I do not know how Tanzania came into it because it was part of the East African community. It was part of the East African community, but what I know is that Kenya and Uganda both used to get their power from Jinja in Uganda. There is Owen Falls, where there was an HEP power station in Jinja. So both Uganda and Kenya used to get power from Owens Fall in Jinja, Uganda. Imagine on the Kenyan side, if you're in Mombasa, the power you used to use up to 50s and 60s, it used to come all the way from Jinja, Uganda. And later I think Kenya may have predicted that Amin would come. So Kenya decided to have its power in Kenya. Several power stations were started. You'll find that in Kenya, rivers flow in a certain 3 or 4 directions. You'll find that one direction starts from around the mountains, Mount Kenya, flows all the way eastwards into Indian Ocean. I'll just mention 3 major ones. I'll mention Tana River, I'll mention Athi River, and Uaso North. But you'll find of all these rivers, it is only Tana River which had falls which could be converted into hydroelectric power. We continued that for a good time, but then we had these weather problems that there were occasions when half of Kenya, if you draw the line, the half that is in the west would get rains, and the half that is towards the east would not get rain. And all the power stations were along Tana River. So the government decided to move to the west so that they have powers should rainfall fall in one direction. To the west, we have major rivers. I can only mention 3. The largest being River Nzoia, the second being River Yala, and the third one being River Mara, which all goes towards Lake Victoria. But we had a small problem in that when, of course, there is this Kinasondu Mirio, there was a plan to have Ouko really fought for Sondu Miriu to have a power project there, and also in Webuye Falls. Webuye Falls is more known as Nabuyole. The money which was to be spent for the two was taken to the desert in Turkwel Gorge. We also have some other rivers which like River Weiwei, River Turkwel, and whatever. Those are the ones who go northwards towards Lake Turkana. But then Kenya came and discovered that we have a better source of electricity, and this is the geothermal. They started geothermal. First of all, they started at a place called Olkaria near Naivasha. Now we have several places. We have in Baringo, we have Menengai crater in Nakuru, and so on. I think right now, over 3/4 of our power is through geothermal. Then later, solar and wind energy came, so that we are now having almost over 80 or 90% of our powers through clean energy. But the problem we are having in Kenya is that before we moved into geothermal, solar, and wind, there are some businessmen. We have businessmen who are close to politicians who are very clever. Any problem we have in Kenya, corona, anything mentioned, if it comes up, they usually take that one to be a God-sent opportunity to grab money. So the IPPs, independent power producers, signed a contract with the government that they are to supply power to us up to 2030. Up to 2030. Now, what these IPPs do, independent power producers, they don't produce power. They have their generators, that their generators are quiet. At the end of the month, they are paid money. So that should there be a shortfall in power, that is when they switch on their generators. And you find that their generators, their power is charged 10 times what other people do. But my suggestion here is that in future we do this, we look for a law where we terminate all the independent power producers on the spot, so that in the future we rely on power alone. Lastly, we are headed to a place where our vehicles, bicycles, motorcycles, and so on, they'll be charged with electricity. And this is good, only that it may be the price of charging your vehicle may vary, because power is not from 11 p.m. up to 7 a.m. throughout the night. There is less use of power. So that is the time when electrical cars and such appliances would be used. So people with electric cars, they are supposed to organize to start charging their vehicles or their whatever between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. And that way is when we will have our self-reliance, and life will come down to be cheap. That is the history of power since Owen Falls Day. East African Power and Lightning broke up to be Kenya Power and Lightning when the East African community collapsed. Have a nice time, Kenyans.